6 years. That's how long I carried her dream on my back like a mule bred for loyalty and sacrifice. It wasn't always this heavy. At first, it felt like pride. Back when she'd hold my hand with ink-stained fingers after studying until midnight and whisper, "Thank you for believing in me, Marcus." I believed, all right. Believed so hard that I took double shifts, skipped vacations, said no to promotions that required me to relocate, and poured every bonus check into her tuition, her rent, her textbooks, and those endless essential fees that med school seemed to invent every other semester. When her student loan application got denied, I co-signed without hesitation. When her car broke down, I sold mine and took the bus. When she had breakdowns during finals, I stayed up with her, holding back the weight of her anxiety with a cracked joke and a warm meal. I wasn't just her husband. I was her cheerleader, her financier, her crisis intervention team, her human Xanax. I used to joke that I wasn't her partner, I was her sponsor. And we'd laugh, mostly because it was half true, and partly because it hurt to say out loud. But never, not once, did I say it with resentment. I loved her, and I believed in her. Until that morning. She was in the shower, humming some upbeat song, maybe something by SZA or Ari Lennox, whatever she played on her empowerment playlist. I was just passing by her desk to grab the charger when I noticed her laptop open, screen still bright. Her graduation speech draft sat front and center, the title bold and centered. To New Beginnings. Curious, proud even, I read on. To new beginnings, it started, and to the courage it takes to let go of the past. My fingers froze on the mousepad. My heart didn't quite beat the same after that sentence. I read it again. And to the courage it takes to let go of the past. Let go of the past? I wasn't the past. I was still very much standing in our house, paying our bills, reheating her leftovers, folding her laundry. I was the one who had just bought her a dress for her graduation dinner and booked the restaurant she had pinned on Instagram. What the hell did she mean by that? I scrolled down, hoping to find context, some line that redeemed me, some sentence that acknowledged the years I'd poured into her becoming the woman she now saw in the mirror. But there was nothing. Just mentions of her professors, her classmates, her mentors, her mother, and of course, Kayla, her ever-loyal best friend, who once told me I seemed too comfortable being average. No mention of me. Not even a thank you to the man who paid for every goddamn part of her journey from pre-med to the morning she'd put on that cap and gown. Not a word about the man who built her life while setting his own on fire. I just sat down in her desk chair, staring at the screen, hands folded in my lap like a man trying to stay calm at the edge of an earthquake. The cursor blinked at me like a taunt. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she just hadn't finished. Maybe I'd see a draft tomorrow that included me, called me her rock, or her constant. I almost laughed at how pathetic the hope sounded in my head. But that line, to let go of the past, kept echoing. It wasn't poetic. It was precise. It was a surgical strike buried in metaphors. And I was the target. When she walked out of the bathroom wrapped in steam, in that familiar terry cloth robe, she smiled at me and kissed my forehead. "You're up early." I nodded. "Yeah, just checking emails." "You didn't see the speech draft, did you?" I tilted my head. "I did." She paused, then said lightly, "Don't judge too hard. It's just a rough cut." Rough cut? That line was carved like marble. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled and said, "Sounds like you're ready for what's next." She blinked for a second longer than usual, maybe wondering if I caught something. But she shrugged and walked off to start her makeup. That moment rewrote everything for me. I had been holding up a dream that no longer had a place for me in it. She had already rewritten her story, and I wasn't even a footnote. The 6 years I'd spent carrying her were already being packed away into the chapter labeled What I Outgrew. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. I was numb. There's a silence that comes when your soul finally catches up with what your instincts have been whispering for months. I'd noticed the way she stopped laughing at my jokes, how she said, "my apartment," instead of "our place," how she introduced me less and less in public settings. I'd brushed it off as stress, but it wasn't stress. It was detachment dressed as ambition. And now, it was almost done. I closed her laptop gently. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even ask her to explain. Because in that moment, I realized something more important than any answer she could give. I had become invisible to the person I gave everything for. That morning, as she walked past me with her makeup perfect and her dreams already casting a shadow over mine. I made a quiet promise to myself. She thinks she's starting a new beginning. So will I. And mine won't come with a thank you note or a graduation cap. It'll come with something a little louder, a little colder, a little more permanent. She never left her phone unlocked. Not once in 6 years. It was something I joked about, the way she clutched it like it contained state secrets. If I so much as glanced at it while it buzzed on the table, she'd swoop in with a laugh that didn't quite touch her eyes. Privacy is healthy, she used to say. And I agreed. Until that morning. She left in a rush, coffee in one hand, keys in the other, purse half-zipped. She was late for some student panel on patient advocacy. I watched her go through the front window like I always did, sipping my own cup of stale, reheated caffeine. The door clicked shut. Then her phone buzzed on the couch. I glanced at it. Reflex, not suspicion. But the screen lit up with no lock. That never happened. Not even on accident. My first instinct was to call her, tell her she left it behind. But then the notification blinked again. Kayla. Of course. Girl, did you file yet? The clock is ticking. LOL. My stomach turned in a way I hadn't felt since my mother's funeral, something in between nausea and falling off a ledge. Another message came through before I could process the first. Photo's gonna look weird if you wait till after the ceremony. Don't want him all up in your graduation pics. Haha. I stared at the screen, as if disbelief could undo what I just read. Then came the dagger. He's still clueless, right? Gotta love how useful he's been, though. Let that ink dry, sis. Let that ink dry. It was like reading my own obituary in real time, sent via text and wrapped in emojis. I didn't scroll at first. I couldn't. I just sat there, phone in hand, heartbeat pounding against my ribs like a warning siren. The room went silent around me, except for the blood rushing to my ears. When I finally opened the thread, I saw months of messages, hidden in plain sight. Plans, laughs, complaints, strategy. Everything laid out in casual cruelty between two women who were supposed to love me, one as my wife, the other as a trusted friend. Marcus is like the perfect training wheel. Solid until you're ready to really ride. Med school was the goal, not the marriage. He's sweet, but he's not built for where I'm going. That one gutted me. Not because it was harsh, but because it was exactly how she'd started treating me in the last year. Like I was some relic of her old life. The man who paid for the classes, kept the fridge full, stayed up to quiz her with flashcards, but didn't belong in the polished version of her future. The Marcus she built with? That guy didn't make the cut. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just put the phone back where she left it, like some invisible crime scene I didn't want to disturb. I stood in the middle of our living room, surrounded by framed photos of us, ski trips, graduation dinners, our honeymoon in Tulum. And I realized none of it mattered anymore. All those smiles were temporary, staged for the camera, archived for the illusion. I was never her destination. I was the bridge she used to get there. But even in that storm of betrayal, I didn't break. Because what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been building something too. While she studied her anatomy flashcards and vented about clinical rotations, I was up every night in the spare room coding like a man possessed. NovaSync wasn't just an idea, it was a living, breathing platform. A medical diagnostics AI that could detect anomalies faster than human specialists. I'd pitched it quietly, developed it under the radar, surrounded myself with a skeleton crew of remote engineers who signed strict NDAs. I told no one, not even her. She thought I was just tinkering with some side project, something to keep me busy while she built her empire. She used to call it cute when I stayed up late at my desk, blue light glasses on, scribbling flowcharts like a man lost in a dream. But that dream had teeth. And just last week, it bit. MedAxis, one of the fastest growing medtech corporations in the country, had acquired NovaSync in a quiet, under-the-table deal. $500 million. Closed. Locked. Executed. I'd insisted on a 1-week NDA before they made the announcement. My lawyer, Raymond, had found it strange. You don't want the buzz? The press? What's the point of going public if you're keeping quiet? I just shook my head and said, give me a week. I needed to be clean. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. Raymond had known me for a decade. He could tell when something personal was in the shadows. And this? This was personal. I wasn't just holding on to that information for drama. I was holding it like a sword, waiting for the right moment to pull it from its sheath. She thought she was timing everything perfectly. Wait until graduation. Smile for the cameras. File the paperwork. Walk away with the illusion of moral high ground. And, she assumed, half of whatever little I had left. But she didn't know that little had just become life-changing. She didn't know she was divorcing a half-billionaire. And because of the NDA, she wouldn't have any legal claim to it. The ink wouldn't be dry in time. I sat back down, staring at the wall like it held answers I hadn't yet found. My heart ached, not just from betrayal, but from the eerie calm settling over me. It was like grieving someone who was still alive, someone who kissed you goodbye that morning but buried you in her mind months ago. She had no idea what storm she had just walked into. But I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to rage. I was going to wait. And when the ink dried, just like she planned, I'd be there. Not as the broken husband she thought she left behind, but as the man she never saw coming. The strange thing about success is how quiet it can be when you want it to be. While she buried herself in hospital rotations and late-night study groups, I buried myself in code. Not just lines of code, but architecture, scalability, future-proofing. NovaSync wasn't built to be trendy. It was built to be vital. It started as an idea during one of her breakdowns. She'd come home from a clinical shift fuming about how long a patient waited for results. "It's archaic," she'd muttered. "We're doctors, not fortune tellers. We shouldn't be guessing off delays." She was venting, but my mind had already begun assembling pieces. I started researching AI applications and diagnostics that very night. 2 months later, I had a working prototype that could scan inputted vitals and symptom clusters to produce predictive analytics. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the lag-riddled mess hospitals were using. I tested it under fake names, ran simulations, even pitched it quietly to a small hospital in Oregon who thought they were beta testing a university research tool. Their success rate jumped 9% in a quarter. That was enough. I scaled, hired freelance engineers from around the world, created a shell company to shield development, kept my name off every public-facing document. And then, the real interest came. MedAxis. They've been watching the space for months, buying up smaller platforms and folding them into their larger ecosystem. But NovaSync was different. Our engine was cleaner, our prediction rate faster, and our interface light years ahead. I didn't even have to chase them. One of their VPs reached out to me directly via a secure message through a dev forum. "Is Marcus Blaine open to acquisition talk?" I was. Cautiously. 3 meetings later, I was sitting in a penthouse conference room in Chicago with their executive team, including their sharp-as-glass CEO, Anna Raleigh. She looked at me over the top of her glasses and said, "Why so quiet? This is brilliant work. You're sitting on something huge. Why haven't you gone public?" I sipped my water. Timing. Raymond, seated beside me, gave me a sidelong glance but said nothing. Anna leaned forward, clearly amused. "And what exactly are you waiting for, Mr. Blaine?" I looked her in the eye and smiled. "Graduation season." She laughed. "That's cryptic." I didn't elaborate. The deal took 3 more weeks to finalize. Lawyers drafted contracts thick as bricks. Analysts ran valuation models. MedAxis threw in options, profit sharing, a full exit clause, and a 1-year advisory role. I negotiated a 1-week media blackout after the ink dried. No press. No leaks. No internal memos beyond need-to-know circles. Raymond didn't get it. "You're worth $500 million now, Marcus. What exactly are we hiding for?" I just shrugged. "Let's call it a graduation gift." He didn't laugh, but he did stop asking. He's known me long enough to recognize that when I start speaking in metaphors, there's blood on the floor somewhere. That week, I walked through our house like a man holding 2 lives in his hands, one crumbling, one rising. She came home tired and distracted, talking about her rotation hours, some professor who wanted to mentor her postgrad, and how she might specialize in cardiology. I listened, nodded, even offered to rub her shoulders like I used to. She smiled, grateful but absent. She had already left me in her mind. I could feel it every time her eyes didn't quite meet mine. But she didn't know I had just transferred the final payment into our shared account. 6 years of debt, all gone. The account she thought was modest now had an extra $380,000 in it. My parting gift. I wanted her to think she'd won. That the financial rug was still under her feet. I kept playing the role. Supportive husband. Reliable Marcus. The guy she could count on until she let go of the past. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. There's a stillness that comes when you know how the story ends and everyone else is still fumbling through Act 2. One night, I stayed up late, going over NovaSync's backend infrastructure. It was like checking on a child I'd raised while no one else was looking. Clean code, strong security, proprietary algorithms, it all hummed like a living, breathing thing. She'd never once asked about it, never peeked over my shoulder or inquired about my late nights at the desk. Maybe she didn't care. Or maybe she didn't believe I had anything worth caring about. She was wrong. The morning before her graduation, she was up early, curling her hair and rehearsing her speech in front of the mirror. I watched her through the crack in the door. She looked beautiful, confident, ready to conquer the world. And yet, I couldn't help but feel like I was staring at a stranger wearing my wife's skin. I left a gift box on the kitchen counter before she walked out the door, a silver bracelet with her initials, a small card inside that read, "You made it. Proud of you. M." She texted me a heart emoji an hour later. I didn't respond, because by then, I was already in Raymond's office, signing the final phase of the acquisition. There were cameras, a handshake photo with Anna Raleigh, and a glass of champagne I barely sipped. When it was done, Raymond handed me a manila envelope. "Everything's finalized. Wire confirmation is in. And your press release, set to drop in 2 days, per your request." I nodded. "Good." He tilted his head. "So, are we celebrating?" I stood there, staring out his window at the city skyline. "Not yet. The celebration comes later." He didn't ask when. He didn't have to. He just raised his glass and said, "To the long game." I clinked his glass and whispered, "To the reveal." That night, I returned home before she did. I reheated leftovers, set the table, lit a candle like I used to when she pulled all-nighters. When she walked in with her gown draped over her arm and stress still in her eyes, I kissed her forehead. "You hungry?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Starving." I served her, asked about her day, let her complain about some speech edits and Kayla being late. She didn't know that I knew everything. She didn't notice the slight edge in my smile. She had no idea I had just signed the kind of deal people kill for. She thought I was her safety net. She didn't realize I was the storm. Graduation day came wrapped in sunshine and irony. She was radiant, absolutely glowing. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't stir something in me. There was still a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with underneath all that ambition and detachment, but it was buried under layers of performance, curated smiles, and polished speeches. Still, I played my part. Crisp navy suit, pressed shirt, matching tie, standing beside her like a prop. Just the husband. We parked near the auditorium, her parents riding behind us in their rental, all grins and fuss. Her mother was already crying. Her father, stoic as ever, held a bouquet of pink lilies too tightly, like he was afraid someone might steal the only thing he'd actually contributed to her journey. "You okay?" I asked her as we crossed the pavement. She looked at me briefly, blinking against the sun. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" I shrugged. "It's a big day." She nodded, then walked ahead, heels clacking against the concrete, gown slung over her arm like it weighed nothing. And maybe it didn't. Maybe all those years really had become weightless to her tuition payments, grocery runs, the late-night drives to the emergency room when she got sick, the time I sold my vintage guitar to cover one of her surprise lab fees. Forgotten, or rewritten into something else. Something disposable. Backstage was a flurry of activity. Graduates hugging, fixing each other's caps, lining up alphabetically while parents found their seats. I stood to the side, tucked near a wall, trying not to be in the way. A few of her classmates passed by, offering polite nods or casual glances, the kind you give someone you don't fully recognize but assume must belong. She spotted me from a few feet away and called out, "Marcus, hand me the folder?" I held it out. She took it without looking at me. Then, turning to the woman beside her, she said, "Oh, this is Marcus. Just my husband." Just, that word wasn't new, but hearing it that way, flat, tossed out like an explanation for a misplaced purse. Hit harder than I expected. Not my partner, not my biggest supporter, not even the man who made this possible. Just my husband. I felt like background noise at my own investment. I smiled anyway. "Nice to meet you," her classmate said. "You too," I replied. Then I stepped back, letting her own the space. That was what she wanted, right? To shine without my shadow anywhere near her spotlight. I watched her pose for pictures, adjust her sash, check her makeup in the reflection of her phone. Her eyes scanned the crowd for Kayla, and when she finally spotted her, she lit up. They hugged like sisters. Kayla winked at her. I didn't need to hear what they said. I'd already read enough. But watching it live, that wink, that sly little smirk, it turned something in my gut. I caught Kayla's eyes for a brief moment. Her smile faltered. Good. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and forced inspiration. The dean droned on about perseverance, dedication, the triumph of the human spirit. I clapped when everyone else clapped, cheered when names were called. When it was her turn to walk across the stage, I stood, not out of obligation, but out of closure. I watched her accept her diploma with a glowing smile, watched her grip the hand of the administrator like this was the beginning of her empire. And maybe it was. Just not the one she thought she controlled. The applause died down, the final speaker took the mic, and then it came her moment. She stepped up to the podium like it belonged to her. Confident, poised, beautiful in that high achiever way that demanded admiration. I already knew what was coming. I'd read the speech. Still, part of me hoped she'd changed it. That maybe something in her heart had softened since then. Nope. To new beginnings, she started, smiling out at the sea of caps and families, and to the courage it takes to let go of the past. There it was, word for word. No acknowledgement, not even a glance my way. She spoke of mentors, of late-night studying in libraries, of how her chosen family kept her sane. She thanked Kayla by name. She gave a nod to her professors, to her mother for always believing in her, and to everyone who saw my future even when I couldn't see it myself. Not a single syllable about me. I sat through the rest of the speech like a ghost in my own life. Numb, applauding because it was easier than walking out. I could feel the heat in my chest, disappointment simmering beneath stillness. But I didn't let it break the surface. I just kept smiling. Afterward, the photo frenzy began. Families poured onto the lawn, snapping selfies, throwing caps in the air. Her father insisted on a dozen variations. Just her, just the girls, one with her mom, one with the whole tribe. Finally, she turned to me. Marcus, can you take one of us? Not, can you be in one? Just take it. I nodded, took the phone, captured the moment. Thank you, she said absently, already checking the angles. Then, almost as an afterthought, she slid next to me and said, okay, one quick shot with my husband. The smile she gave for the camera was flawless, professional, detached, rehearsed. Click. That was the photo she would use, probably. Post it with some caption about support and teamwork, just enough to protect her image. But the moment the ink dried on those papers, I knew she'd crop me out of her narrative like I was a smudge on glass. Still, I said nothing. Later that evening, back at our apartment, I handed her the same flowers her father had nearly crushed earlier that morning. She looked at them, smiled politely, and kissed me on the cheek. I'm exhausted, she said. But this was a good day. Yeah, I replied, watching her disappear down the hallway. It was. In a way, it really was. Because while she celebrated her degree, her photos, her perfectly sculpted speech, what she didn't realize was this. The real graduation hadn't been hers. It had been mine. It happened exactly 1 week later, like clockwork. The house was quiet. A soft Tuesday morning sun filtered through the blinds, and the smell of coffee lingered in the kitchen. I'd made breakfast. Her favorite, even. Soft scrambled eggs, toast with honey, and papaya slices she swore helped her digestion. She was scrolling her phone as she ate, barely acknowledging me except for the occasional nod. I watched her over the rim of my mug. There was something surgical in her silence, like she was bracing to deliver a dose of pain she'd already measured. When she finally spoke, her tone was clinical, her words flat. Marcus, she said, not looking up. I've thought a lot about this. It's time we part ways. She didn't even use the word divorce. I put my mug down gently. Part ways. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin manila envelope, sliding it across the table like a receipt. I'll make this easy. Just sign. No need for drama. I didn't touch it. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The same woman who used to fall asleep mid-sentence on the couch with anatomy flashcards in her lap. The same woman I used to pick up from clinicals at midnight, half-frozen and exhausted, clutching fast food bags and murmuring about chest x-rays. Now, she sat across from me calm, rehearsed, detached, as if I were a client she'd finished working with. I opened the envelope slowly, unfolded the papers. It was all there. Neatly typed, itemized, emotionless. She wanted half. Half of everything. The apartment, the car, the furniture, and of course, the business. She listed Novasync as marital property, estimating its value at a modest $80,000, clearly assuming it was just some quirky tech project, nothing of real consequence. Then came the bold part: spousal support, monthly payments, justification, career sacrifice during medical training. She claimed she deferred income potential for the sake of our household, that she deserved ongoing compensation for the years I'd supported her. I stared at the words. I wasn't angry. I was impressed. It was bold, efficient, cold. She didn't flinch as I read. She just sipped her coffee and said, "It's all standard. I've already retained counsel." I folded the papers, placed them back in the envelope, and tapped my fingers on it lightly. "You're sure this is what you want?" She looked at me like I was asking something silly. "It's for the best." I nodded. "All right. Then give me a few days to respond formally." That surprised her. She expected resistance. A fight. Maybe even begging. She'd built this version of me in her head. Passive, dependent, too soft to let go. The same man who cheered her through med school, bought her groceries, and folded her scrubs. She didn't realize that while she was busy planning her escape, I'd already opened the door. She stood, picked up her plate, rinsed it, and turned off the faucet like she'd done it 1,000 times. Like this was just another normal Tuesday. She kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks for breakfast." Then she walked out the door with her white coat draped over her arm and her stethoscope hanging from her neck like a badge of victory. I stood in the kitchen, holding the envelope like it might dissolve if I gripped it too tightly. 3 months ago, she came home in tears because a patient died unexpectedly. I held her for an hour on the bathroom floor while she sobbed into my chest. She told me I was her safe place. Now I was an obstacle. I sat down at my desk and called Raymond. "It's go time." "You got served." "Yep." He chuckled bitterly. "She has no idea, does she?" "None." We set the wheels in motion. He'd already had everything prepared: financial declarations, ownership documentation, digital timestamps, contract history. We had airtight records of when Novasync began, the original LLC formation, the transfer of IP rights. And best of all, we had the acquisition documents, sealed, signed, and dated 3 days after the filing. She thought she'd be walking away with half a startup. She didn't know she'd just forfeited half a fortune. Raymond and I met in his office that afternoon. He flipped through her petition like it was a kindergarten art project. "Spousal support?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Bold. She's entitled to nothing post-filing, right?" "Exactly. Especially since the acquisition wasn't finalized until after she served you. Everything beyond that date is legally yours, free and clear." I nodded slowly. "Let's keep it quiet. No retaliation. No show of force. I want her to believe this is going exactly how she planned." Raymond leaned back in his chair. "You sure about that? You don't want to file a counterclaim yet?" "Not yet," I said. "Let her feel comfortable. Let her think she's winning." He grinned. "You're playing the long game. Always." That night, she came home late. Said she had a rough shift. I listened, nodded, pretended to care. Not because I didn't, but because I knew it didn't matter anymore. Her emotions were no longer my responsibility. Her bad days, her triumphs, her fake apologies, those belonged to the next man naive enough to believe he could build a life with her. We went to bed in silence. She turned her back to me. I stared at the ceiling. 3 more days until the announcement. 3 more days until her perfect little plan unraveled. I closed my eyes and counted backward from 1,000. Not because I was anxious, but because I needed the quiet before the storm. She wanted a clean exit. I was going to give her one. Clean, legal, and absolute. And when it was over, when the truth came out, when the ink dried and the media explosion hit like a wave, she'd look back at that morning and realize just how badly she miscalculated the man sitting across from her. She thought I was soft. She thought I was static. She thought she was walking away with everything. But she was walking away from a $500 million empire. And she didn't even say thank you. It dropped at 9:01 a.m. on a Thursday. Right on schedule. No pre-hype, no teasers. Just a clean, direct press release from MedAxis posted on their official channels. Picked up within seconds by every major tech and healthcare news outlet in the country. MedAxis acquires Novasync in $500 million strategic expansion deal. There it was. My name in black and white, my photo next to Anna Raleigh, CEO of MedAxis, our hands clasped in a firm shake, both of us smiling like a pair of industry titans. I wore that smile like armor. Clean, professional, unbothered. But beneath it, it was war paint. By 9:06, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Emails, calls, texts, contacts I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Investors who ignored my pitch decks back when I was bootstrapping wanted to grab coffee. Former classmates congratulated me like we'd been best friends all along. LinkedIn lit up like a Christmas tree. But one message made me pause. Her name on the screen. Her. What is this? Marcus. What the hell is this? No. Hi. No, congratulations. Just confusion. Panic. A flicker of dawning comprehension. I stared at the message for a full minute. I could imagine her sitting at the break room table, scrolling through her phone with a confused frown, reading the headline again and again like it might change if she blinked hard enough. I didn't reply. I had nothing to say, not anymore. My words had already been spoken through contracts, valuations, and that perfect headline that confirmed everything she didn't know. Instead of texting back, I opened my calendar and forwarded the contact inquiry from Forbes requesting a short quote for their feature article. I replied simply, "Let's talk legacy." At 10:15 a.m., Raymond called, chuckling so hard he nearly choked. "Brother," he said, "you've officially broken the internet." "Good," I said, sipping my tea. "She texted you yet?" "Of course. She'll call next. Then maybe cry. Then show up. She won't get past Damaris." He laughed again, longer this time. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." By noon, she called 4 times. Damaris, my assistant, had strict instructions: block, log, and forward to legal. Nothing more. But just after lunch, I heard her voice. Not in person. Not directly. Over the phone, in the hallway outside my office. The kind of whisper cry that turned sharp at the edges. Damaris had stepped out to lunch, and one of the interns had buzzed her in without realizing who she was. I stood behind the glass door, listening. "Kayla, I swear to God, I didn't know," she was saying. He never said a word. Not a single thing. And now it's everywhere. It's on every screen. $500 million. Kayla. He played me. Played you? No. I played the game you started. I just finished it better. Her voice broke. Why didn't I wait? Why didn't I just... God, I filed too early. And there it was. The moment it clicked. She didn't just file for a divorce. She filed herself out of a legacy. I turned the doorknob and stepped out. Her eyes snapped to mine. Red, puffy, mascara trailing ever so slightly. Still beautiful, still composed, but this time, the mask had cracks. "Marcus," she breathed. "Please, can we talk?" I tilted my head. "I think your paperwork said everything." She stepped forward. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If you had." I interrupted. "If you'd known I was about to be rich, you'd have stayed?" She paused. Just a flicker. That was all the answer I needed. I gestured toward the elevator. "You need to leave." "Marcus, wait. I made a mistake." "No. You made a plan. You just didn't check the timeline." She blinked rapidly, her breath catching. "I was scared, okay? I thought we were done. I didn't think. You didn't think I was worth staying for," I said. "Let's not rewrite it now." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence filled the space between us like a verdict. She looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes on her, my team, the interns, Damaris just returning from lunch. People pretending not to look while absolutely looking. She pulled her jacket tighter. "Can we at least talk later?" she asked, voice lower now. I shook my head. "From now on, if you want to talk, you talk to Raymond." The elevator dinged behind her. "Don't do this," she said as the doors slid open. "I'm not doing anything." "You did." And with that, she stepped inside, the doors closing on a face I no longer recognized. That night, I sat at home alone. No music, no noise. Just me, a decanter of scotch, and the TV muted as news anchors discussed my acquisition. It should have felt like victory. Maybe, in some ways, it did. But mostly, it felt like silence. Not sadness. Not joy. Just the sound of a chapter ending. I picked up my phone and checked my emails. Dozens of speaking invitations, media requests, board offers. But I scrolled past them all until I reached the last message forwarded from Raymond's team. Her lawyer. Subject: revised petition. New language. Claims of hidden assets. Attempts to reclassify Novasync as marital intellectual property. I almost laughed. It was so desperate. So clumsy. She'd finally realized what she walked away from, and now she was trying to climb back in through a legal window already sealed shut. Raymond had already filed the rebuttal. He'd included the original timeline of the acquisition, the NDA proof, and, most damning of all, her own text messages to Kayla, which I had quietly collected and archived. The messages where she joked about using me, where she timed the filing like a business transaction, where she called me useful. Those weren't going to vanish. My legal team wasn't just going to fight back. They were going to bury the strategy she thought was clever under the weight of her own words. I poured another drink and looked around the apartment, the place we picked out together, the kitchen I stocked, the couch she cried on during step 2 boards, the bookshelf with the framed photo of our wedding day tucked between dusty medical volumes, and an old cookbook I used more than she ever did. It was all mine now, not because of the court, but because she'd forfeited it. And the woman who once dreamed of white coats and luxury would now face something she'd never planned for. Irrelevance. The first sign of panic came 3 days after the press release. The apartment smelled different. Not like the clinical peppermint oil she usually diffused or the soy candles that made the place feel like a Pinterest board. No, this was nostalgia. Butterscotch cookies and lavender. She was baking. Voluntarily. I stepped into the kitchen and found her standing there in an apron she hadn't worn in years, the one with a cartoon heart and the words DR in training scrawled across it in faded red. Her hair was tied back, face soft, almost hopeful. "Hey," she said. "I made cookies. Your favorite." I stared at her. Not angrily. Not with suspicion. Just with the calm detachment of a man watching a rerun of a show he'd already outgrown. "Thanks," I said. I took one, bit it, nodded politely, then walked out without another word. That was the beginning of the performance. Suddenly, she was everywhere, offering back rubs, leaving little post-it notes on the bathroom mirror. "You've got this. And proud of you." She started cooking again. Dinner at 6:30, candles lit. She played our old jazz playlist at night like we were a couple reconnecting after a tiff. But her eyes gave her away. They watched me too closely, tracked every movement like a hawk trying to time its descent. She laughed too easily, touched my arm too often. The performance was clumsy, because this wasn't love. This was fear. She was trying to crawl back into the life she threw away. The visits to my office started soon after. The first time, she showed up with lunch. I didn't even let her past reception. Damaris intercepted her with a raised brow and a clipboard. "She says she's just dropping off food." "Noted," I said. Politely declined. Of course, Damaris replied without missing a beat. She didn't come back empty-handed again, but she kept coming. 3 times the next week. Flowers. Lattes. A handwritten card about healing and forgiveness. All denied entry. All logged. Damaris kept a spreadsheet. Names, dates, items, messages. She was methodical, almost enthusiastic. "She really thinks she's going to wiggle back in," she said one morning, sipping her espresso. "She thinks guilt and charm are assets," I replied. "And she's late to both." I nodded. "Log everything. If she gets aggressive, notify legal." It didn't take long for her lawyer to send a revised petition. The language changed. Now, they accused me of hiding financial gains, intentionally misleading her during the divorce process. They called the MedAxis deal a concealed asset, as if I'd crafted a whole corporate merger just to spite her. Raymond responded with elegance and steel. We submitted her original petition, complete with timestamps that preceded the final acquisition. We added screenshots of the text she sent Kayla about using me, about filing early, about walking away clean. And just for insurance, we included the message logs from Damaris's visitor spreadsheet, highlighting the sudden shift in her behavior after the deal went public. She wasn't just clawing at what she lost. She was exposing her own intent. The last time she tried to show up at my office, building security stopped her. She wasn't on the list. Her name flagged the visitor system now, an alert to my assistant and legal counsel. Damaris texted me a photo, her standing in the lobby, arms folded, frustration written all over her face. "Damaris, she says she just wants to talk. Heart to heart." Me. Heart to heart? We signed the death certificate already. Damaris sent a thumbs up and walked her out personally. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Her lawyer sent another letter. This one was a plea disguised as a warning. Reconsider the terms. Negotiate. Avoid court. Raymond laughed out loud when he read it. She's spiraling. She should. Think she knows what's coming next? She will, I said. When the counter hits. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by silence. My phone buzzed again, this time, a voicemail. I played it on speaker. Her voice cracked. Marcus, I know I messed up. I thought I was doing the right thing for me. I thought I was being brave. But maybe I was just being stupid. Can we talk? Please? I'll sign whatever you want. I just want to fix this. It was the most honest thing she'd said in months. And it was far too late. I forwarded the message to Raymond. The next day, he filed the counter. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation followed by attempted cleanup once the target turned out to be more than she bargained for. Raymond's filing was meticulous. 1 count of misrepresentation, 1 of attempted marital fraud, and a clause invoking a breach of verbal agreement. I had the emails, the notes, the voicemails, all documenting her promises to repay me for med school, her acknowledgement that I funded her entire education. It was ironclad. Then came the next blow. An anonymous complaint was filed to the state medical board. A formal ethics review was opened. Someone had submitted a bundle of her text messages. Screen captures. Metadata included. The committee wasn't stupid. They saw exactly what it was. An aspiring physician joking about using someone for financial gain, timing a divorce to avoid sharing future earnings, weaponizing a relationship for personal profit. It didn't matter that it wasn't a felony. It was enough to question her integrity. Enough to trigger a review. When the news reached her, I wasn't there. But Damaris overheard her sobbing in the lobby bathroom. Security was called. She left in tears, clutching her phone, her face pale and pinched. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about letting the truth run its course. She'd walked out on me thinking I was nothing but a temporary stepping stone. But the moment she filed those papers, she kicked off an avalanche. And now, as she scrambled to rebuild the wall she tore down with her own hands, all I had to do was watch. She panicked. I planned. And there was no crawling out from that. It was oddly quiet the morning the countersuit was filed. No thunderstorms. No dramatic music in the background. Just the hum of my espresso machine and the low whir of the dishwasher. I sat at the kitchen island, dressed in a dark Henley and jeans, reading through the finalized document on my tablet. Every word was sharp, calculated, precise. Raymond had outdone himself. Count 1, intentional misrepresentation. Count 2, attempted marital fraud. Count 3, breach of verbal contract. That last one, that was personal. It was the email she never thought I kept, sent from her student account in year 2 of med school. The subject line was casual. My promise, don't let me forget. She had written it after one of her particularly emotional study breakdowns, saying she didn't want to ever forget how much I'd invested in her dream. She'd promised to pay me back for every dime once she became a doctor. She probably assumed I deleted it years ago, but I kept it. Just like I'd kept every transfer receipt, every loan statement, every credit card payment tied to her education. Not because I thought I'd need them, but because when you give someone everything, you want to remember the cost. Raymond had also attached an itemized spreadsheet of what I'd paid over the years. Tuition, $312,000 rent, utilities, textbooks, $48,000 travel, groceries, miscellaneous, $20,000 total. $380,000. Her lawyer responded within hours, asking if we were open to mediation. That's when I knew the countersuit hit harder than expected. They thought we'd cave for a quiet settlement. They didn't realize I wasn't trying to settle. I was trying to set a record. That afternoon, she called. I answered. Marcus, she said softly. We don't have to go through court. I'll sign whatever. Let's just be adults about this. Adults, I said. Like when you joked about using me until the ink dried? She inhaled sharply. You read those texts out of context. I read them with dates and timestamps. That's all the context I needed. Silence on the other end. Then she said, please. I'll withdraw peacefully. I'll give up everything. Just don't ruin my name. That's what it came down to. Not remorse. Not love. Reputation. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline outside my window. You ruined your name, not me. I just held up the mirror. She hung up. No apology. Just silence. Later that evening, Raymond called to let me know she was trying to get the case dismissed. She says she wants to move on amicably, he told me. She means quietly. Exactly. Tell her no, I said. We're moving forward. Raymond paused. You sure? I'm not doing this for revenge, Ray. I'm doing this for every person who ever got used and discarded like a stepping stone. I'm doing this so she knows that burning bridges doesn't always mean you get to walk away. He sighed, then said, all right, we'll proceed. But the fallout didn't stop there. By the end of the week, the medical licensing board had confirmed that her ethics hearing would move forward. The evidence had been reviewed. Her character was now a matter of public interest. She went dark on social media, deleted photos, turned off comments. Kayla tried to play damage control, posting vague quotes about people trying to dim your light. It backfired. Screenshots of their text exchanges leaked anonymously. Someone posted them on a pre-med forum. The title read, "This is what entitlement looks like." They were reshared, debated, analyzed. Suddenly, she wasn't an inspiring grad with a glowing future. She was a case study in ambition gone toxic. I didn't need to say a word. The world was doing it for me. One night, Damaris texted me a screenshot of a Reddit thread where someone had dissected the situation in bullet points. At the end, they wrote, "Moral of the story, don't marry someone just to upgrade your status. Especially not someone who reads the fine print better than you." I didn't laugh. I just saved the thread. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted documentation. A record of how someone can try to destroy you and fail. She made one last attempt before the court date. Showed up at the apartment wearing the same outfit she wore the day I proposed to her. I opened the door but didn't let her inside. "Don't you remember us?" she said, voice trembling. "How it used to be." "I remember everything," I said. "That's the difference." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want to be your enemy, Marcus. You made that decision when you turned me into your exit strategy." She stood there for a long moment before whispering, "I thought you were just a placeholder." I nodded once. "You were wrong." Then I closed the door. I sat down on the couch, let the silence soak in, and stared at the divorce paperwork again. The original, the revised, the countersuit. All of it laid out like chapters in a book I didn't ask to write. She tried to play the game, but I designed the rules. Courtrooms aren't built for closure. They're built for containment, of emotions, of noise, of mess. They smell like old paper and recycled air. The chairs are never quite comfortable. The clocks tick louder than they should. And when the person who once held your heart walks in wearing a blazer they probably picked for sympathy, it doesn't sting the way you thought it might. It just clarifies everything. She walked in 2 minutes late, flanked by her lawyer, hairstyled in soft curls like it might soften her case. Her expression was pulled tight, a blend of nerves and entitlement. I watched her scan the room, hesitate when she saw me, then look away like I was the one who broke us. She still hadn't realized the difference between leaving and losing. Her lawyer, Richard Kane, was polished. Expensive suit, confident gait, the kind of man who specialized in flipping narratives. He stood when the judge entered, his hands folded neatly, his tone syrup smooth. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is about transparency. My client, Dr. Alana Rhodes, entered her marriage with trust. She supported her husband through his business journey, unaware of the substantial financial developments he withheld from her. We argue this was intentional, strategic, an attempt to deprive her of fair marital assets." I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I simply looked at the judge, then at Raymond, who stood calmly beside me, the picture of composed precision. Raymond stepped forward. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Marcus Blaine, was served divorce papers on April 3rd. The MedAxis acquisition was finalized on April 6th. The NDA and internal documents proving the timeline are included in Exhibit A. Moreover, text messages between Dr. Rhodes and her friend. Exhibit B shows she planned to file early in order to keep photos clean and let the ink dry before anything public surfaced. The judge, an older man with tired eyes and a reputation for zero tolerance for drama, adjusted his glasses and flipped through the exhibits. He didn't rush. Every second felt like a hammer pounding against the shell of the story she had tried to build. Richard tried to recover. "These texts are informal, out of context." "Your Honor," Raymond interrupted, "they are time-stamped, dated, and corroborated by the sequence of events." The judge looked at Alana. "Did you file for divorce under the belief that Mr. Blaine's company was of modest value?" She swallowed. "At the time, yes." "Were you aware of the potential deal with MedAxis?" She hesitated. "No," Raymond cleared his throat. "Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to call Ms. Anna Raleigh to testify." The doors opened. and Anna entered like a force of nature. Elegant, sharp, no nonsense. CEO of MedAxis and arguably one of the most respected figures in the industry. She took the stand. Ms. Raleigh, Raymond began. When did discussions with Mr. Blaine regarding Novasync begin? February 9th, she said, without a blink. Our legal team reached out based on an internal referral. And when was the deal finalized? April 6th. Was there any indication during the early discussions that Mr. Blaine was going through divorce proceedings? No, she replied. The matter came up only after the filing was public. But our NDA predated that. Did he ever misrepresent the value or status of the company to you? Not once. In fact, he was unusually reserved. Cautious, even. Raymond nodded and turned to the judge. Your Honor, the testimony confirms the acquisition did not exist as a legal asset during the time of divorce filing. The plaintiff's claim to half the acquisition is therefore invalid. The judge nodded slowly, jotting notes. Then came the final blow. Raymond brought out the email. Subject: My promise, don't let me forget. He read it aloud in full. Her words, her acknowledgement, her promise to pay back every cent of the $380,000 I had invested in her education. Richard objected. It's emotional, not contractual. Raymond held up a copy of her signature on a follow-up message. It was followed by a written payment plan proposal. Dated. Acknowledged. Never retracted. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked up, leaned forward, and said the words I'd waited 6 months to hear. Spousal support is denied. Claim to Novasync's valuation is denied. Reimbursement of $380,000 in educational support is granted to Mr. Blaine. Her face cracked then. It wasn't just shock. It was the realization that she hadn't just lost her case. She'd lost the story. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. A few reporters in the back began scribbling rapidly. This was going to leak. Even if the docket was sealed temporarily, someone would talk. Richard leaned in toward her, whispering something urgent. She shook her head. Her shoulders slumped. And for the first time, she looked small. Not because she was weak, but because the image she built had finally shattered under the weight of her choices. The judge banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. I stood, buttoned my blazer, and didn't look back. As I walked past her, she glanced up, eyes red but dry. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't gloat. Because victory doesn't need a monologue. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Lighter. Raymond slapped my back. Hell of a win. It was never about winning, I said. It was about the truth. Well, the truth just bought you justice and $380,000. I exhaled, slow and deep. She'll never be the same, Raymond said. She already wasn't, I replied. We walked to the car in silence. And when I shut the door behind me, I didn't feel relief. I felt finality. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the burial of a version of me that once believed love meant unconditional sacrifice. Now I knew better. Love, real love, doesn't demand your silence in exchange for someone else's rise. And when someone treats you like a chapter, you don't wait for the next page. You close the book. 1 month passed. Quietly, without drama, without fireworks. No new texts. No calls. No surprise appearances at my office. She disappeared from my life the same way she tried to erase me from hers, surgical, deliberate, clean. Except this time, the silence wasn't mine to carry. It was hers. Then one morning, an envelope arrived. No postage. Hand-delivered. Cream-colored. With my name written in careful cursive I hadn't seen since our first anniversary. I stared at it for a while, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition. Some things, some people, wrap their guilt in elegance. I opened it. Inside was a check. Partial payment, $75,000. And a single note, written on the same kind of stationery she used for med school thank you cards. I never thought you'd be the one to win. I was wrong. No apology. No explanation. Just 7 words soaked in defeat. I folded the note back into the envelope and walked it to the sink. Watched the flame from a match curl the edges black. Watched the paper curl in on itself like it was trying to disappear. That was the last gift I accepted from her. The rest of my day went on like any other. At the office, the new product team was finalizing the prototype for Novasync Horizon. A portable diagnostic unit that could be deployed in rural clinics with 0 signal latency. I'd hired 10 engineers in the last 3 weeks. The dev floor buzzed with energy. Whiteboards covered in sketches, code snippets, timelines. People solving problems because they believed in the mission, not because they were trying to prove something to someone else. In the corner of my office sat a shelf with one photo frame. Not of her, of me. Sitting at a cracked dining table, coding at midnight under a flickering bulb. I'd taken it during the early days of NovaSync, back when it was just me, caffeine, and an idea I couldn't shake. I kept that photo to remind myself. I didn't build this out of revenge. I built it because I refused to be small. That afternoon, I spoke on a panel for strategic scaling at an innovation conference downtown. I wore a charcoal blazer, no tie, open collar, confident but grounded. As I walked backstage, someone from the event staff handed me a card. "She left this at the front," the girl said hesitantly. "Said you'd understand." I took it, half curious, half exhausted. Opened it. I saw the panel invite. I wanted to be there. I just couldn't. "I'm sorry." I tore it in half, dropped it in the trash. "You don't get to spectate the success you try to sabotage." The panel went well. I talked about scalability, investor pressure, founder fatigue, the importance of building not just for market fit, but for soul fit. The audience leaned in, took notes, asked good questions. Afterward, a young founder approached me. "How did you know it would work?" she asked. I smiled. "I didn't. I just knew I couldn't let someone else's limited vision trap me." She nodded slowly, inspired. I walked away knowing I'd become the man I used to dream about being when I was sleeping on potential. At home that night, I stood in the kitchen alone, stirring a pot of red lentil stew I'd perfected during her third-year rotations. Back then, I made it for her. Tonight, I made it for me. The difference tasted like peace. I took my bowl out to the balcony, looked out over the skyline, and let the city hum around me. There was no applause, no echo of footsteps down the hall. Just my breath, steady and strong. My phone buzzed. "Raymond, check your inbox," he said. "Your TEDx pitch got accepted." I smiled. "What's the theme?" "Reclaiming power. You were born for this." I nodded, then ended the call. Later, I opened a folder on my laptop titled Future. Inside were drafts, ideas, sketched outlines for a mentorship fund, something I'd been thinking about launching. A way to support people who, like me, had built everything while being overlooked. Maybe I'd call it the Invisible Builder Fund. It wasn't about charity. It was about recognition, about making sure no one had to prove their worth in silence ever again. A week after the check arrived, I received a LinkedIn request from her. No message, no note. I declined it without hesitation. She had graduated, but I had evolved. She delivered a speech about letting go of the past, but I turned that past into capital, into ownership, into something that couldn't be cropped out of a photo or buried in a revised petition. She played the short game. I built a legacy. Somewhere out there, she was probably trying to rebuild her image, praying the medical board cleared her ethics review. Maybe she'd get lucky. Maybe she wouldn't. But either way, her future would carry the stain of a plan gone wrong, and the name of the man who refused to be erased. As for me, I didn't need closure. I didn't need vindication. I'd already received the only graduation gift I ever truly wanted, freedom. And the view from this side of peace? It was worth every bill I ever paid. The evening had started like any other, just another dinner gathering where my wife, Claire, insisted I accompany her and her friends. I knew the drill. Smile, nod at the right moments, let them talk over me, and accept my role as the insignificant extra in Claire's world. But I hadn't expected this. The red wine hit my face before I even registered the motion of Claire's hand. The warmth of it spread down my cheek, dripping onto my collar, soaking into my shirt. The restaurant's soft background chatter seemed to dim, and for a second, the whole room froze, except for Claire's laughter. It wasn't nervous or apologetic. No, it was sharp, full of amusement, the kind of laugh that let everyone know she meant it. "Why are you always acting like such an idiot?" she sneered, tilting the wine glass in her hand, as if contemplating throwing the rest. Laughter erupted around the table. Some of her friends giggled into their napkins. Others exchanged glances, unsure if they should join in. One or two of them looked uncomfortable, but they wouldn't dare say anything. Not against Claire. I sat there for a moment, feeling the wine seep into my skin, the acidic scent filling my nostrils. Every instinct screamed at me to react, to say something, to defend myself, to throw the damn wine back in her face. But I didn't. I reached for a napkin, dabbing at my face slowly. The humiliation burned deeper than the sting of the alcohol. This wasn't the first time Claire had embarrassed me in public. It wasn't even the worst thing she had done. But it was different. There was something in the way she looked at me, like she wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. She enjoyed this. I could feel all their eyes on me, waiting to see what I would do. Would I lash out? Would I storm off in a huff? Would I laugh along and let Claire win again? I did none of those things. I took a slow breath, straightened my posture, and calmly placed my napkin on the table. Without a word, I stood up, adjusted my shirt as best as I could, and turned away. The restaurant floor felt endless as I walked out, their whispers following behind me. I could still hear Claire chuckling, no doubt making some comment about how dramatic I was being. But I didn't care. By the time I got to my car, my hands were steady. No shaking, no hesitating. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and let the silence wrap around me. The scent of the wine clung to me, but it wasn't just wine I could smell. It was the end, not just of this evening, not just of this humiliation, of everything. I pulled out of the parking lot, driving on autopilot, my mind replaying the last few months. No, the last few years. The cutting remarks disguised as jokes, the constant dismissals, the way she treated me as if I were just another fixture in our home instead of her husband. It had been happening for so long, creeping into our marriage like rust on metal, slow and corrosive. And I had let it. But tonight was different. I wasn't going to wake up tomorrow and pretend it hadn't happened. I wasn't going to let Claire sweet talk her way out of it or buy me a meaningless apology gift to smooth things over. I wasn't going to let myself believe, even for a second, that I had to endure this any longer. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my decision was made. This wasn't just another cruel joke. This was the last straw. I stepped into the house, locking the door behind me. The familiar scent of our home, a home that had felt less like ours and more like hers for a long time, filled my lungs. I walked past the framed wedding photos, past the expensive decor Claire had insisted on, past the perfectly curated life she had built on my silence. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the darkened screen of my laptop. My reflection stared back at me, faintly visible in the dim light. A man I barely recognized. That was about to change. I opened the laptop and pulled out a notepad, clicking the pen open with a quiet snap. And then I started writing. Not a letter, not a complaint, not an angry outburst. A list of everything Claire had ever done to me. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment I had swallowed my pride for the sake of peace. I wrote down dates, words, actions, things I had forced myself to forget but never truly had. I detailed the slow erosion of our marriage, the way she had made me feel small in my own home. The words flowed easily, almost too easily. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her suffer. It was about remembering. Because for too long, I had convinced myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe it was just how Claire was. But as I stared at the pages filling up with ink, I knew the truth. It had never been me. It had always been her. And now? It was over. Claire didn't come home immediately. I wasn't surprised. She loved the attention too much to leave the party early, especially after her little spectacle. She'd be basking in the glow of her moment, reveling in the laughter, replaying the way the wine splashed across my face in her mind. I sat alone in the dimly lit kitchen, my fingers tapping against the wooden table. The house was quiet, too quiet. It hadn't always felt this way. There was a time when this home had been filled with warmth, with the sound of shared laughter, quiet conversations stretching late into the night. But that was years ago. Now, the silence was suffocating. I looked down at the notepad in front of me. The list I had started earlier had grown longer. Every line felt like a scar reopened, a wound I had tried to ignore for far too long. Claire's insults had started subtly at first. A harmless joke here, a teasing remark there. I had laughed them off in the beginning. But then they grew sharper, crueler, laced with an edge I couldn't ignore. Oh, don't bother helping, you'd just mess it up. You? Fix something around the house. That's funny. God, you're embarrassing. The words had built up over time, chipping away at me like slow erosion, wearing me down until I didn't even recognize the man staring back at me in the mirror. Tonight was just the final confirmation of what I had been denying for too long. Claire didn't respect me. She didn't love me. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing a hand over my face. The scent of wine still lingered on my skin. I needed a shower, but I couldn't bring myself to move. The front door opened. Her footsteps were light, almost careful, as she stepped inside. I knew her well enough to recognize the shift in her energy. She was expecting me to be in bed, curled up and licking my wounds like a kicked dog. She didn't expect me to be sitting here, waiting. When she stepped into the kitchen and saw me at the table, her expression flickered for just a second. She masked it quickly, but I caught it. Unease. She tilted her head, forcing a smirk. Oh, come on. You're not still upset about that, are you? I didn't respond. She sighed dramatically, tossing her purse onto the counter. Seriously, it was a joke. Everyone was laughing. You always take things so personally. I still didn't say anything. That was when she actually looked at me. Really looked at me. Her smirk faltered. What? I held up the notepad. She squinted at it, confused. What the hell is that? I flipped it closed and set it aside. A list. Her brows furrowed. A list of what? I met her gaze evenly. Everything you've ever done to me. Silence. For the first time in a long time, Claire had no quick comeback, no sarcastic remark, no dismissive wave of her hand. She let out a short laugh, but it sounded forced. Oh, please. She crossed her arms. Don't be dramatic. I didn't look away. Her amusement slowly faded. You're serious. I nodded. Something flickered across her face. It wasn't guilt. Claire never felt guilt. It was something closer to annoyance, maybe even nervousness. She didn't like this. She didn't like the idea of me keeping track, of me remembering. Because for years, she had relied on me forgetting. On me brushing it aside. On me letting it go. I don't know what you think you're doing, she said, her voice sharper now. But I'm not in the mood for your little pity party. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. You humiliated me tonight. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, it was a joke. You call me an idiot. You acted like one. I inhaled slowly. You threw wine in my face. She scoffed. You deserved it. And there it was. No regret. No apology. Just justification. Claire had never seen me as an equal. I had been nothing more than a background character in her life. An accessory she could dress up or ridicule depending on her mood. I pushed my chair back and stood. This was the last time. Her brow furrowed. What? This was the last time you'll ever get to humiliate me. She let out a laugh, but there was an edge of unease behind it. Oh, please. What are you going to do? Run away? Go cry somewhere. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind she was used to. No. I'm going to make sure you never do this to me again. I grabbed my notepad, my laptop, and turned to leave the kitchen. Claire stood frozen for a moment before calling after me. Oh, so now you're just going to storm off like some victim? Grow up. I didn't stop. She hated this. She hated not being in control of the situation. Claire thrived on having the upper hand, on knowing exactly what buttons to press. But tonight, she had lost that control. And for the first time in years, I felt it. I climbed the stairs, entered the bedroom, and locked the door behind me. Claire banged on it almost immediately. Are you serious? You're locking me out. I didn't respond. Fine. Be childish. Sleep in there alone. Her footsteps stormed away, and I heard her grab a pillow and blanket from the hall closet. She would sleep in the guest room tonight, fuming. I climbed into bed, staring up at the ceiling. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. The house was quiet in the morning, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that felt tense, thick with the weight of everything left unsaid. Claire hadn't come back to the bedroom. She had spent the night in the guest room, no doubt stewing over the fact that I had locked her out. I had barely slept, but I wasn't exhausted. I had been running on something else, something stronger. Clarity. I stepped into the kitchen and brewed a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the air as I sat at the table, laptop open, notepad beside me. The list. I read over it again, not because I needed to remember, but because I needed to be sure. Every single line was a reminder, a confirmation of what I already knew. This wasn't fixable. I heard Claire's footsteps before I saw her. She always walked with purpose, heels clicking against the hardwood floor like she was making a statement with every step. This morning, she was barefoot, and yet she still carried herself with that same air of superiority. She stopped in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression unreadable. So, are you done sulking? I didn't look up. I took a sip of coffee. Morning, Claire. She scoffed, stepping into the kitchen. Oh, we're being civil now? What happened to all that dramatic brooding last night? I finally glanced up at her. I wasn't brooding. She smirked, but there was an underlying tension in her face. Oh, right. You were making a list. God, I hope you realize how ridiculous that is. I didn't respond. I just watched her. That seemed to irritate her. Claire didn't like silence unless she was the one creating it. She thrived on reactions, on controlling the narrative. She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of orange juice, and poured herself a glass. So what's the plan here? She asked, leaning against the counter. Are you expecting me to grovel? To beg for your forgiveness? I closed my laptop slowly. No. She took a sip, raising an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I pulled out my phone and unlocked it. I could see her watching me, curious but still dismissive, like she was waiting for me to say something she could mock. Instead, I just pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Sharp, clear, unmistakable. Why are you always acting like such an idiot? The sound of laughter followed. The clinking of glasses. The humiliating moment, perfectly captured. Claire froze. The video played on, the camera angle shifting slightly. It had clearly been recorded by someone sitting at the table, someone who hadn't found it as funny as she did. When the video ended, I set my phone down. She let out a short laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Who the hell recorded that? One of your friends. Her jaw tightened. Which one? I leaned back in my chair. Does it matter? She crossed her arms again, but this time, it wasn't out of defiance. It was defensive. So what? You're keeping a video like some bitter ex-girlfriend? Are you planning to do something with it? I didn't answer. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Jesus, you're unbelievable. You act like I committed some kind of crime. It was a joke. I tilted my head. Did it look like a joke to you? She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. People laugh at each other all the time. Don't be so sensitive. People laugh with each other, Claire. Not at. She scoffed, but there was a flicker of something in her expression, something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not because she thought I would hurt her. No, Claire wasn't afraid of me like that. She was afraid because, for the first time, she wasn't in control. Delete it, she said suddenly. I smirked. Why? It was just a joke, right? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I let the silence stretch between us, waiting. Seriously, she said, her voice lower now. Delete it. I took another sip of coffee. No. Her nostrils flared. You're acting like a child. I shrugged. Maybe. But you're acting like someone who's suddenly very worried about a harmless joke. Her jaw tightened. She looked away, rubbing her fingers against the rim of her glass. I swear to God, if you try to embarrass me with that video, I set my coffee down with a quiet clink. You'll what? She snapped her mouth shut. And just like that, the power shifted. For years, Claire had held all the control. She dictated the way our marriage functioned, the way people perceived us, the way I saw myself. She had crafted a narrative where she was the strong, charismatic wife with the weak, pathetic husband who was lucky to have her. But now she was the one floundering. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. You've spent years making me feel small, Claire. You've torn me down in front of your friends, your colleagues, hell, even strangers. And every time, I let it go. Every time, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that I loved you too much to make it a big deal. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything. But last night, I continued. Last night, I realized something. I realized that you don't love me, Claire. You love control. You love having someone to belittle, someone to make yourself feel superior to. That's not. I held up a hand. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. She swallowed. I sat back again, watching her carefully. I'm not going to post the video, if that's what you're worried about. I'm not petty, but I am done pretending. She hesitated. What does that mean? I exhaled slowly. It means things are going to change. Claire wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to me standing my ground, to me refusing to play along. She tried to mask her unease with indifference, but I saw right through it. Fine, she muttered, pushing off the counter. You want to play this little game? Be my guest. She turned on her heel and stalked out of the kitchen. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in our marriage, Claire was the one walking away uncertain. Claire stormed up the stairs, her footsteps heavy, each one laced with frustration. She expected me to follow her, to chase her down, to try and talk things through, to beg for an apology that would never come. That's how it had always been. She would cross a line. I would call her out. She'd deflect. I'd try to smooth things over, and the cycle would repeat. But not this time. This time, I stayed put. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and let the silence settle around me. Claire thought she was in control of this situation, but she had no idea just how much I had already taken back. Because while she had been out humiliating me last night, I had been busy. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my banking app. The numbers were exactly where I had left them. Half of our shared savings, now securely in my own account. Legally mine. Claire had always been the one who managed the finances, not because I couldn't, but because she liked to. She liked knowing where the money was going, how much was being spent, and, more importantly, how much power she had over it. She controlled the credit cards, the accounts, the bills. She made sure I always had just enough to keep me comfortable, but never enough to make me independent. That changed last night. I had transferred my half, removed her access to my credit card, and frozen our joint account. If she wanted money, she'd have to dip into her own savings. I locked my phone and set it down. Claire would find out soon enough. I turned my attention back to my laptop. I had already drafted the necessary emails to my lawyer. Just preliminary inquiries, nothing official yet. But it was only a matter of time before this marriage was over. Because I was done. I wasn't going to be her doormat anymore. I wasn't going to be the man she laughed at in front of her friends. I wasn't going to need her approval to feel like I was worth something. A sharp thud echoed from upstairs. Claire had slammed something. Maybe a dresser drawer. Maybe the door itself. She was angry. Good. Let her be angry. She had built this entire marriage on the idea that I would always be there. That no matter how cruel she was, I would stay. That I would tolerate the cutting remarks, the dismissive glances, the way she spoke to me like I was an inconvenience rather than her husband. But the moment she realized she was losing control, the moment she felt the ground shift beneath her, that's when the panic would set in. I didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, she came stomping back down the stairs, her face carefully composed, but her eyes burning with frustration. She was holding her phone in one hand, gripping it tightly. I didn't look up right away. I let her stand there, shifting from one foot to the other, waiting for me to acknowledge her. Finally, I glanced up. Something wrong. She let out a short laugh, but it was hollow. You think you're clever, don't you? I arched an eyebrow. I don't know what you mean. She lifted her phone slightly. My card got declined. I took another sip of coffee. That's unfortunate. Her jaw clenched. Cut the crap. What did you do? I set my mug down and leaned back. I secured my finances. Her nostrils flared. Our finances. I tilted my head slightly. No, Claire. My finances. I took my share. The rest is still there for you. She scoffed, running a hand through her hair. You think you can just do that? Just take half of our money like you're entitled to it. I exhaled slowly, letting my fingers drum against the table. You mean like how you've been using our money to go on vacations with your friends? Buying things you never even told me about? Throwing expensive dinner parties where I'm nothing more than the butt of the joke? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, you're still on that? It was one night. I shook my head. No, Claire. It wasn't. It was years of the same treatment, the same disregard, the same humiliation. She stared at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. So what? You're just going to what? Punish me? Make me suffer because your ego got bruised? I smiled. No. I'm just done letting you dictate my life. Claire crossed her arms. You're being dramatic. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally standing up for myself. Her eyes flickered with something. Hesitation, uncertainty. She didn't like this. She didn't like that I wasn't reacting the way I used to. Normally, she would be able to gaslight me, manipulate me into thinking I was overreacting, convince me that I was the problem. But not this time. She exhaled sharply. So what now? I studied her carefully. Now? I start planning my future without you in it. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, please. You wouldn't last a week without me. I smirked. That's what you'd like to believe. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at it, and I watched as her expression shifted. More messages. More people talking. It wasn't just about the money. People were seeing her differently now. I knew at least one of her friends had shared that video beyond our dinner table. And once things spread, they didn't stop. Claire had always been the golden one, the woman everyone admired, the one who could do no wrong. But now, She was being seen through a different lens. I could tell by the way her shoulders tensed that she had seen something that rattled her. She glanced back at me, something calculating in her gaze. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "I am." She inhaled through her nose, her jaw tightening. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the desperate attempt to figure out her next move. But the thing was, she had already lost. She just didn't know it yet. Claire turned on her heel and walked away. I let her go. She could plot all she wanted. She could try to twist things, manipulate the situation, find a way to spin this back in her favor. But it wouldn't work. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't playing by her rules anymore. The next morning, Claire acted as if nothing had happened. I expected this. It was part of her strategy, pretend the problem didn't exist until she could figure out a way to twist it back in her favor. She sat at the breakfast bar, sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone, looking as composed as ever. But I wasn't fooled. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness in her grip, the way she was deliberately avoiding looking at me. I didn't say anything as I poured my own coffee and sat across from her. I could feel the weight of her silence, the brewing storm behind her calm facade. She wanted me to be the first to speak, to break the tension so she could control the conversation. I didn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I sipped my coffee, opened my laptop, and started going through my emails. She lasted about 5 minutes before she snapped. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't look up. "You'll have to be more specific." Her jaw clenched. "Don't play dumb with me. My bank account is frozen, my card is still declining, and," she waved her phone. "This video is everywhere." I slowly shut my laptop and met her gaze. "Oh." Her eyes narrowed. "You knew this would happen." I leaned back in my chair. "No, Claire. You did this. I didn't tell you to humiliate me in public. I didn't make you throw wine in my face. I didn't record the video. One of your friends did. And apparently, the world doesn't find it as funny as you thought they would." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You should have deleted it." I arched an eyebrow. "Why? It was just a joke, right?" Her fingers curled around her phone. "God, you're pathetic. You're actually acting like a victim." I smirked. "Because I was." She stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My clients are seeing this. My boss saw it. I got an email this morning about a meeting they want to have. They think this makes me look unprofessional." I tilted my head. "Huh. Imagine that." Her glare was ice. "You're enjoying this." I took another sip of coffee, my voice calm. "I'm enjoying watching you deal with the consequences of your own actions." She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "And what? You think you're winning? What's your plan, huh? Destroy my reputation? Take half the money and run? Do you really think you're the one coming out on top?" I sighed, shaking my head. "Claire, this isn't about winning. It's about finally standing up for myself." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Oh, please. You think you're some kind of martyr? You're still the same pathetic man you've always been. You think a few financial moves and a viral video make you stronger?" I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. "No, Claire. What makes me stronger is realizing I don't need you." She froze. For years, she had held on to this belief that I was dependent on her, that I needed her validation, her approval, her presence. She thought I would always be there, no matter how badly she treated me. But she was wrong. I grabbed my laptop, my phone, and my coffee. "I have work to do." She blinked, as if she hadn't expected me to just walk away. But I did. I went to my office, closed the door, and left her standing there, alone with her panic. I sat at my desk, exhaling slowly. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control. I wasn't sure how long I had been working when I heard Claire on the phone. Her voice was sharp, laced with barely contained frustration. "I don't care how it happened. Just fix it," she snapped. A pause. "No, I don't know who sent it to them, but I need it taken down." She was scrambling. I smirked to myself. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to people seeing the real her. I continued with my work, letting her deal with the fallout. Eventually, she came knocking. I didn't look up. "Busy." She opened the door anyway. "We need to talk." I sighed, closing my laptop. "About what?" She hesitated, then crossed her arms. "You need to help me fix this." I blinked. Then I actually laughed. She scowled. "I'm serious." I shook my head. "You don't get it, do you? I don't need to help you. I'm not your problem solver, Claire. I'm not your PR team. You did this to yourself." Her nostrils flared. "Do you have any idea what this could cost me?" I stood up, meeting her glare head on. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? My self-respect? My dignity? My sanity? She clenched her jaw. This is ridiculous. I shrugged. Maybe, but it's not my problem anymore. She stared at me, something flickering behind her eyes. For a second, just a second, I thought I saw something close to fear. Not fear of me, fear of losing. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't in control. I picked up my phone, checked the time. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Do you need anything else? Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But she didn't. Instead, she turned and walked out. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of my desk. It was happening. The shift. The power that she had wielded over me for years was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And the best part? I didn't even have to do anything. She was undoing herself. Claire was unraveling. I saw it in the way she carried herself now. Her usual confidence had dimmed, her sharp, cutting tone laced with something new. She was still fighting, still trying to regain her grip, but I could see the cracks forming. She spent most of the day on the phone, trying to put out fires. The video had spread further than she anticipated, and no amount of damage control could fully erase the stain on her perfect reputation. I sat in the living room, watching as she paced back and forth, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. What do you mean it's still up? She hissed. I thought you said you could get it taken down. A pause. Her fingers curled into her palm. I know how the internet works, but there has to be something we can do. She stopped mid-sentence, her back straightening. Her head turned slightly, her eyes meeting mine. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. The silence stretched between us, heavy and loaded. She ended the call abruptly and tossed her phone onto the couch. Are you enjoying this? I leaned back against the cushions. Enjoying what? She scoffed. Watching me deal with all this. I took a sip of my drink. I don't have to watch you deal with anything, Claire. You brought this on yourself. Her hands balled into fists. You could have deleted the video. I arched an eyebrow. And you could have not thrown wine in my face and humiliated me in front of your friends. Actions have consequences. She shook her head, pacing again. It's not just about you, you know. This is affecting my career. My boss is putting me on leave while they assess my behavior. My clients are distancing themselves. She stopped and looked at me, her lips curling in frustration. But I bet you love that, don't you? I set my drink down. No, Claire. I don't love watching your life fall apart. But I do think it's poetic justice that you're finally experiencing what it's like to be dismissed, judged, and disrespected. Her nostrils flared. This is so typical of you. Playing the victim, pretending like you were some helpless little puppy in our marriage. I took care of everything. I built this life, and you. You controlled everything. I interrupted, my voice even. You dictated every decision, every expense, every move we made. You never saw me as an equal, Claire. You saw me as an accessory. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because she knew I was right. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she folded her arms and exhaled sharply. So what now? You just punish me. I shook my head. I'm not punishing you, Claire. I'm just done letting you punish me. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she hesitated. That hesitation was new. Claire never hesitated. She always had an answer, always had a counterattack. But now, she was losing. And she knew it. She turned away from me, grabbing her phone again, scrolling furiously as if looking for some last shred of control. I let her, because at this point, nothing she did could change what was coming. I checked the time. I have a meeting soon. She didn't look up. Of course you do, she muttered. I stood up, walking past her, pausing only when I reached the door. By the way, you might want to check your email. That made her head snap up. I left before she could say anything. I sat in my office, letting the weight of everything sink in. The email I had mentioned, the one she was about to open, it was from my lawyer. It wasn't official yet, but the process had started. I wasn't just leaving Claire emotionally. I was leaving her legally. I could almost picture the way her face would drop when she saw it. The realization, the full weight of what she had done finally hitting her. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. She had spent years treating me like I was disposable, like I needed her more than she needed me. She was about to find out how wrong she was. I didn't have to wait long. Claire's reaction came just as I expected. Barely 15 minutes after I left her in the living room, I heard the sharp sound of her phone being thrown against the counter. Then came the stomping. Heavy, deliberate, filled with barely contained rage. She didn't knock on my office door. Claire didn't knock for anything. She pushed it open, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, her face an unreadable mask. I didn't look up right away. I kept my focus on my laptop, as if I didn't hear the door, as if I didn't feel the storm brewing in the room. Finally, she spoke. "You're divorcing me?" Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream, like I had expected, but there was something underneath it, something sharp and dangerous, like a blade hidden beneath silk. I typed another word on my document, hit save, and closed my laptop before looking up. Yes. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Just like that. I leaned back in my chair, meeting her gaze evenly. "No, Claire. Not just like that. This has been a long time coming." She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, come on. This is over a stupid dinner party? Over a little bit of spilled wine? You're really throwing away our marriage over that?" I shook my head slowly. "No, Claire. I'm throwing away our marriage because I don't want it anymore." That hit her. Her lips parted slightly, her body going rigid. She had been prepared to argue, to manipulate, to twist the situation into something small and petty. But she wasn't prepared for that. She took a slow step forward, her arms loosening slightly. "You're serious?" I nodded. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." She blinked, as if trying to process it. Then, just like that, the mask was back on. She scoffed, crossing her arms again. "Fine. You want a divorce? Go ahead. But don't think you're going to walk away with anything." I smirked. "Claire, I already did." Her jaw clenched. "Excuse me." I picked up my phone, scrolled through my banking app, and then turned the screen toward her. She went pale. "You son of a..." "Careful," I said, my voice calm. "Remember, everything you say can be used against you in court." Her nostrils flared, but she didn't take the bait. Instead, she turned on her heel, pacing the room. "You think you're smart," she muttered. "You think you've won." I sighed, rubbing my temple. "Claire, this isn't a game." She let out a dry laugh. "Oh, it is. And you just changed the rules." I watched her carefully. Claire was calculating now. That meant she was shifting her strategy. She wasn't going to throw things. She wasn't going to scream. That was too easy, too emotional. Instead, she was going to try and control the narrative. "I'll contest it," she said, her voice smoother now. "You think this will be simple? That I'll just sign the papers and disappear? Oh no. We built this life together, and I'm going to make sure you pay for this decision." I shrugged. "You can contest all you want. It won't change anything." She narrowed her eyes. "You really think you have the upper hand?" I smiled. "Claire, for the first time in this marriage, I do." She stared at me, studying me, searching for something she could use. Then, she did something I hadn't expected. She softened. Her arms uncrossed, her lips parted slightly, and she stepped closer. "Do you really want to do this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I tilted my head. "Yes." She exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. "Look, maybe we got carried away. Maybe things got bad. But we've been together a long time. We have history." I leaned back in my chair. "History isn't a reason to stay in something that makes you miserable." She hesitated. "You're really miserable?" I nodded. "You've made sure of it." She looked away. For a split second, I thought I saw something close to regret. But with Claire, I never knew if it was real or if it was just another performance. Finally, she sighed. "What if we tried?" I raised an eyebrow. "Tried?" She shrugged, forcing a small smile. "To fix this? I mean, come on. We've been through worse, haven't we?" I let the silence stretch between us before speaking. "What's the real reason, Claire?" Her brow furrowed. "What?" I stood up slowly, walking toward her. "Why do you suddenly want to fix things? Is it because you miss me? Because you want our marriage to work?" She said nothing. I took another step forward. "Or is it because you're afraid of what happens when you don't have me around anymore?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. There it was. I exhaled, stepping back. "That's what I thought." She scoffed. "Oh, don't flatter yourself." I smirked. "I don't need to. The truth is already doing that for me." She turned, gripping the doorframe. "You'll regret this." I picked up my phone again. "I doubt it." She stormed out, and I let her go, because I knew, deep down, that she had already lost. That night, Claire didn't sleep in our bedroom. She didn't even try to. I heard her moving around in the guest room, shuffling through drawers, opening and closing cabinets, making just enough noise to remind me of her presence. It was her way of making a statement. She wanted me to know she was still there, that she wasn't going anywhere quietly. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city outside. A part of me expected to feel something, regret, hesitation, maybe even nostalgia. But there was nothing. No sadness. No longing. Just relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I turned over, closed my eyes, and let the exhaustion take me. Morning came quickly. The scent of coffee drifted through the air, but it wasn't the usual warm, comforting aroma that filled our home. It was sharp, deliberate, like Claire was making it just for herself. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the counter, her phone in one hand, a steaming mug in the other. She looked up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence. Then, she set her mug down and exhaled. So that's it. I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking my time. What's it? She let out a humorless laugh. You're really just walking away from all of this. I leaned against the counter, meeting her gaze. I walked away a long time ago, Claire. You just didn't notice. Her lips pressed into a thin line. That's ridiculous. Is it? I tilted my head. Because I think it's the most honest thing I've said in years. She shook her head, taking a slow sip of her drink. You don't get it. You don't just leave. It doesn't work like that. I sighed, setting my mug down. Claire, we both know this marriage hasn't been a marriage for a long time. You don't respect me. You don't even like me. She flinched, just barely, but enough for me to see it. I continued. You liked having me around because it was convenient. Because I made things easier for you. But let's be honest. If I had walked away years ago, you wouldn't have fought for me. She looked away, her fingers tightening around her mug. I waited. She exhaled, rubbing her forehead. You're really going through with this. I nodded. I already started the process. Her head snapped up. You what? I sent the email to my lawyer yesterday. I said simply. It's already in motion. Her eyes darkened. You didn't even talk to me first? I arched an eyebrow. Would it have changed anything? She scoffed. That's not the point. It kind of is. She stared at me, something unreadable flickering in her gaze. Then, she shook her head, laughing under her breath. Unbelievable. I leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, Claire. She rolled her eyes. What? If I hadn't said anything, if I had just kept going the way things were, would you have ever considered fixing our marriage? She hesitated. Then, she looked away. That was all the answer I needed. I exhaled, pushing off the counter. I'll start moving my things into the guest room today. It's only a matter of time before one of us leaves the house, so might as well make things easier. She let out a short laugh. Wow, you've really got it all planned out, don't you? I shrugged. I had a lot of time to think about it. Her fingers drummed against the counter. You're not the man I married. I smirked. You're right. I'm not. That guy put up with your crap. I'm done being him. Her expression hardened, but I saw something else behind it. Something closer to fear. Not fear of me. Not fear of being alone. Fear of losing control. For years, she had dictated the terms of our relationship. She had been the one pulling the strings, making the decisions, deciding how things would play out. But now, she was scrambling. And for the first time, she had no idea what to do next. She stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back. Fine. Do whatever you want. I nodded, finishing my coffee. I will. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Because no matter what she did, no matter how she tried to twist things, the truth remained the same. This marriage was over. And I had never felt so free. The day passed slowly, but the tension in the house was anything but subtle. Claire wasn't speaking to me, not out of sadness, but out of calculated anger. She wanted me to feel the weight of her silence, to feel guilty, to second-guess myself. But that wasn't going to happen. I spent most of the morning moving my things into the guest room. Not that I had much. Over the years, Claire had made sure the house reflected her tastes, not ours. My presence had been reduced to a small space in the closet, a few drawers, and a single shelf in the bathroom. It was strange, packing my things and realizing just how little of me actually existed in this house. I had spent years living here, and yet, it felt like I was visiting someone else's home. By mid-afternoon, I was nearly finished. My suitcases were in the corner, my laptop and personal files stacked neatly on the desk. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I was zipping up the last bag when I heard Claire's voice downstairs. It wasn't just her voice. She was on the phone. I stepped closer to the door, listening. No, He's being completely unreasonable, she said, her tone sharp. He thinks he's some kind of victim just because I called him out in front of people. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Even now, she refused to take accountability. A pause. I don't know what he's planning, she continued, her voice growing more frustrated. But I'm not just going to sit here and let him make me the bad guy. Another pause. Then, she let out a bitter laugh. No, he's not smart enough to pull anything drastic, she said. I mean, come on. This is him we're talking about. My fingers tightened around the zipper pull. I had spent years listening to Claire talk about me like that. Like I was less. Like I was incapable of thinking for myself, of making my own decisions, of existing without her constant input. She had spent our entire marriage believing she was superior, that she was smarter, that I needed her. But she was wrong. I stepped away from the door, deciding I had heard enough. By the time I walked downstairs, Claire was off the phone, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. She looked up when she saw me. Are you seriously moving into the guest room? I nodded. Yeah. She scoffed. Dramatic much? I grabbed a glass from the cabinet, filling it with water. It's called giving us space, Claire. Something we probably should have done a long time ago. She watched me carefully. You think that makes a difference? Sleeping in a different room? You're still here. I set the glass down. Not for long. She went still. I saw the shift in her expression, the realization that I wasn't just doing this to prove a point. I was done. You're serious. I nodded. Yeah. She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. So that's it. You're just walking away. I exhaled. Claire, you walked away from this marriage a long time ago. I'm just catching up. Her jaw clenched. You're so dramatic. I smirked. You keep saying that. Maybe you just don't like the fact that, for once, you're not the one in control. Her eyes darkened. Don't flatter yourself. I leaned against the counter, watching her. Why does it bother you so much? She frowned. What? That I'm leaving? She crossed her arms. Because it's pathetic. You think this is some kind of revenge? You think you're proving something? I shook my head. No. I think I'm finally choosing myself. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she turned and grabbed her phone, scrolling through something quickly. You know, you're not going to win, she muttered. I sighed. Claire, this isn't about winning. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oh, it is. And you're too naive to see it. I tilted my head. What are you talking about? She held up her phone. I talked to my lawyer. I exhaled slowly. Of course you did. Her smile widened. In surprise, I'm contesting everything. I didn't react. She wanted me to. She wanted me to panic, to scramble, to fight. That was how Claire won, by making people lose their cool while she stayed collected. Instead, I just picked up my glass and took a slow sip. She frowned. That's all you have to say? I set the glass down. Claire, I don't care what you do. Contest it, fight it, drag it out. It doesn't change anything. She studied me. You really think you're untouchable, don't you? I sighed. No. I just don't care enough to play your games anymore. That hit her. For the first time in years, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, something real. Fear. Because Claire thrived on control, and she was losing it. She turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. You're making a mistake. I shrugged. Maybe, but at least it's mine to make. She scoffed, shaking her head. You'll regret this. I smirked. Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. She tensed, her grip tightening. Then, without another word, she walked away. I didn't stop her, because no matter what she did next, no matter how hard she fought, the outcome would be the same. I was leaving, and this time, there was nothing she could do about it. Claire didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. Not one word. At first, I thought it was part of her strategy, her usual method of controlling the situation by making me feel uncomfortable in the silence, like I should be the one apologizing. But as the hours passed, I realized something had changed. This wasn't just her playing mind games anymore. This was something deeper, something real. I saw it in the way she moved through the house, her posture a little stiffer, her steps more deliberate. She wasn't stomping, wasn't slamming doors or making a scene like she normally would when she was angry. No, she was processing. For the first time since this started, Claire wasn't reacting. She was thinking. I went about my evening as usual, making myself dinner, going through some emails, keeping to myself. Every so often, I caught glimpses of her in the hallway or out of the corner of my eye, standing by the window, lost in thought. She was unraveling in a different way now. Not with rage, but with realization. She had spent years believing she was the one in control, that no matter what she did, I would always stay, always tolerate, always bend. But now, she was seeing the truth. I wasn't bending anymore. I was leaving. And no amount of manipulation or contesting or power plays would change that. I was sitting in the guest room later that night, scrolling through my phone, when there was a soft knock on the door. I knew it was her before I even looked up. For a moment, I debated ignoring it. But something told me this wasn't another one of her games. So, I sighed, set my phone down, and said, "Come in." The door opened slowly, and Claire stepped inside. She wasn't dressed to intimidate like usual. No designer blouse, no perfectly tailored pants. She was in an oversized sweater and leggings, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look smaller, almost unsure. It was the most human I had seen her in years. She hesitated, glancing around the guest room. "So, you're really doing it?" I nodded. "Yeah." She swallowed. I checked my email. I leaned back against the pillows, watching her carefully. And she let out a soft breath, her hands twisting together in front of her. "You actually filed." There was something in her voice that I couldn't quite place. Not anger, not even sadness, just disbelief. Like she had never truly considered that this was how it would end. "I told you I would," I said simply. She nodded, looking down at the floor. "Yeah, I didn't think." She trailed off, shaking her head slightly, as if even she couldn't finish the sentence. I waited. She took a slow breath, then finally met my eyes. "I don't want this." I sighed. "Claire." "No, just listen," she interrupted, stepping closer. "I know I've been." She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I haven't always treated you fairly." I arched an eyebrow. That's an understatement. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Yeah, maybe it is." She glanced at the bed, then back at me. "Can I sit?" I gestured to the chair across from me. She let out a small, humorless laugh, but didn't argue. Instead, she sat down, folding her hands in her lap. A few moments of silence passed before she spoke again. "I don't know when things got this bad." I let out a slow breath. "I do." She looked up at me. I held her gaze. "It wasn't just one thing, Claire. It was everything. The way you spoke to me, the way you dismissed me, the way you made me feel like I was nothing in my own home." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," I cut in. "You did mean to, Claire. You liked making me feel small. It made you feel bigger." She flinched, but I didn't let up. For years, I told myself it was just your personality, that you didn't mean the things you said, that if I just tried harder, maybe you'd respect me, maybe you'd see me. I shook my head. "But you never did, and you never would." She inhaled shakily, her hands gripping the fabric of her leggings. "I don't want you to go." I sighed, running a hand down my face. "Claire, please," she said softly. It was the first time she had ever said that word to me, and it almost worked. Almost. I studied her, really studied her. For the first time, she looked lost. But I couldn't let that change my decision. Because this wasn't about Claire anymore. This was about me. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Claire, do you actually want me? Or do you just not want to lose?" Her eyes widened slightly, as if the question had never even occurred to her. And that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't fighting for me. She was fighting for the control she was losing. She was fighting because she hated the idea of being left. But she wasn't fighting because she loved me. I sighed, standing up. "I think you should go back to your room." She stared at me. "That's it." I nodded. "Yeah." She looked down, her lips pressing together, her body tense. For a moment, I thought she might try again. Might say something else, try to pull another card, another angle. But instead, she just nodded. Then, without another word, she stood and walked toward the door. She paused in the doorway, gripping the frame for just a second. Then she glanced back at me, her eyes unreadable. "I'm sorry," she murmured. I exhaled slowly. "I hope one day you mean that." She flinched. Then, she left. And I didn't follow. I sat back down on the bed, rubbing a hand over my face. It was over. For real, this time. No more second-guessing. No more wondering if I was making the right choice. I was done. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen for a moment. Then, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I smiled.